Hello, my name is Bernie Norcott-Mahany. I work at the Kansas City Public Library at the Blueford branch and at Johnson County Community College in Kansas. April is National Poetry Month, and the Academy of American Poets, which has a website, www.poets.org. That website, if you go there, you can get a poem a day. You can actually have one emailed to you. During the month of April, they recommend a poem in your pocket, where you carry around copies of your favorite poem and you hand those out to people that you meet. Since people don't always like getting pamphlets, this is not always the best of plans. At the library, I will have such poems posted. I'll have things that they recommend, and I'll have those available for people at the library. But this probably isn't going to work for many people. The other thing about that is people think about reading poetry like they read other things, which is silently. And poetry is meant to be said, or sung even. These are words that are sort of dead on the page. Unless we say them, unless we give them meaning, they don't quite have the effect that they should. So I'm going to, in fact, take each day and I'm going to read one poem from the public domain. A couple days I may read a few short poems, but ordinarily it'll be one a day. They'll all be in the public domain. And this way, perhaps by my doing this, maybe you'll be inspired to do this likewise. Not necessarily to do videos, but to read poetry aloud, because it will add to your appreciation for poetry. Also, the more you do it, the better you get at it, and being able to read poetry aloud is not such a bad thing. So this first poem is called On First Looking Into Chapman's Homer. It's by John Keats. John Keats was an English Romantic poet. He lived in the 19th century. He died very young. He died in his 20s. The story goes that when he was about 16 or 17, he went to the house of one of his teachers, and he and the teacher spent the day reading Chapman's translation of Homer's Odyssey aloud. Now, Keats went to something the equivalent of what we would call a public school, not one of the British prep schools. And so he had no Greek background. He did not know Greek as a language. And so even though he could appreciate Greek art, he couldn't really read Homer in the original. So Chapman's translation, George Chapman lived in the 17th century, 1600s, and Chapman was the first person to do a complete translation of the Iliad and of the Odyssey. And I encourage you picking up Chapman's Homer. It is actually worth reading. Now, if you've never read Homer before, then that will make it doubly difficult. But Chapman does do a very good job of translation. He is a very good poet, so it's a nice match. So when Keats was able to read the Iliad, actually the Odyssey in its entirety, he was amazed at it, and he wrote this poem in honor of that moment, where he then compares himself to an astronomer discovering a new planet. In this case, the planet Uranus had been discovered recently. And then he compares himself to Cortez. He makes a mistake here. Balboa is actually the guy who crossed the Isthmus of Panama and saw the Pacific. But we can give him some poetic license here. The point is, explorer discovering new venue, and here Keats is saying the same thing about Chapman's Homer. So this is the poem On First Looking Into Chapman's Homer by John Keats. Much have I traveled in the realms of gold, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen. Round many western islands have I been, which bards and fealty to Apollo holds. Oft of one wide expanse had I been told, that deep-browed Homer ruled as his demesne. Yet did I never breathe its pure serene, till I heard Chapman speak out loud and bold. Then felt I like some watcher of the skies, when a new planet swims into his ken, or like stout Cortez, when with eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific, and all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien. That was On First Looking Into Chapman's Homer by John Keats.